Hello everyone, and welcome to my Bold and Beautiful Today channel. Thomas returns to LA and reunites with Hope. Carter and Liam lose hope. Will Thomas make another attempt to win hope when he returns? It's almost time for Thomas Forrester to return to our screens. Fans are aware that Thomas left town months ago and returned with Paris Buckingham as his fiancée. Does Thomas intend to get Hope Logan back, or is he returning to marry Paris? Hope Logan has been loved by Thomas Forrester for many years. Hope has been Thomas's love for years. But when Hope refused to commit to him after he proposed, Thomas ended their relationship. When Thomas returned to town, he talked to Hope about their breakup and even made another proposal, but Hope was still unable to commit to him. Why would the situation today be different? Hope is currently engaged to Carter Walton. It is certain that Daphne Rose will target Carter once more now that she is back in Los Angeles. Carter and Hope's previous breakup was largely caused by Daphne. Hope gave Carter another chance because of Liam Spencer. Liam Spencer will survive. Grace Buckingham said Liam had been sentenced to death. Hope has been with him as often as possible. Nevertheless, Liam is recovering nicely from his brain hemorrhage and has discovered that he has no tumor at all. Will Liam encourage Hope to move on with Carter, or will he attempt to rekindle their relationship? Additionally, Liam and Steffi Forrester have been spending a lot of time together. Stephanie is currently content with John Finnegan, but that could change if he learns that his mother has Luna Nozawa, who is still alive. Will Thomas take the initiative to try to reunite with Hope, or will Liam go after one of his ex-partners? I hope Logan is involved in another romantic triangle. Either way, Hope might easily end up in the center of a love triangle. Hope declares her love for Carter and her desire to wed him. But Liam has a tendency to cheat, and Hope has Carter, who may end up cheating. Can Hope be persuaded to give Thomas another chance so they can see where they can go? Will Thomas return and win Hope over like he did the last time he tried and failed? This time, will everyone at Forest back off and let Hope and Thomas try again? Will Thomas's actions be forgiven by Hope? Will Thomas take all the necessary actions to restore Hope? Hope's predicament. Liam's request. Liam Spencer wants to embrace life and enjoy it to the fullest now that he is no longer dying and never was. Since Steffi Forrester Finnegan left town, he has been spending most of his days with Hope Logan, and he may have a very different perspective on her. Hope may be observing Liam similarly. Does Liam express his desire for Hope's return when he makes a sincere plea to her? He must keep in mind that when he believed that was the end of him, he pushed Hope toward Carter Walton. Hope will be really perplexed by all of this because she and Carter are now engaged. Carter, meantime, believes that he and Hope will have an easy time going forward and is prepared to tie the knot as soon as possible. He talks to Ridge Forrester about his love for Hope and everything they have been through together. Thomas Forrester's world finally clicked back into a semblance of color and meaning. For months, his existence had been a monochrome reel of regret, therapy, and the quiet, disciplined work of rebuilding a man from the foundation up, a project far more intricate and vital than any fashion line he had ever conceived. He had left Los Angeles as a figure of tragedy and toxicity, a man whose singular, consuming obsession with Hope Logan had scorched the earth around them, nearly costing him his son, his family, and the last vestiges of his own soul. He returned not with the grandiosity of a conquering hero, but with the quiet, tentative humility of a pilgrim approaching a sacred, long-dreamed-of shrine. He hadn't come to claim anything, not anymore. He had come merely to exist in the same city air as her, to prove to himself, more than anyone, that he could be near her light without seeking to possess it, to orbit her sun without burning up or causing her to burn. This newfound equilibrium was immediately, catastrophically, and beautifully shattered the moment he saw her, not in a boardroom or a crowded party, but entirely by chance at Il Giardino, where she was sitting alone at a corner table, a half-finished glass of wine and the weight of the world seeming to anchor her to the chair. She was staring into the middle distance, her expression not one of the radiant, idealized Hope he had so often painted in his mind, but of a woman weary, contemplative, and profoundly alone. It was this vulnerability, this stark and real humanity, that undid him completely, and before his carefully constructed walls of self-preservation could snap into place, His feet were carrying him toward her table, his heart a frantic drum against his ribs. His voice, when it found her, was softer than he intended, a breath of sound almost lost in the gentle hum of the restaurant. Hope? Her name was a prayer on his lips. She started, pulled from her deep reverie, and her eyes, those magnificent, soulful eyes that had haunted and inspired him in equal measure, lifted to meet his. There was no immediate shock, no anger, no fear, just a slow, dawning recognition, and then something else, something new, a deep, weary curiosity. Thomas, she said, and his name in her mouth was neither an accusation nor a welcome, but a simple, neutral fact. He gestured to the empty chair, a silent question, and after a heartbeat that stretched into a small eternity, she gave a single, nearly imperceptible nod. He sat, and they simply looked at each other, the chasm of their history, the manipulations, the betrayals, the pain, the few fleeting moments of genuine connection, stretching between them, vast and deep. He didn't offer excuses. He didn't launch into a rehearsed speech about his recovery. He just said, "You look like you're carrying the world on your shoulders," and the simplicity of the observation, its lack of agenda, seemed to disarm her. A sad, faint smile touched her lips. Something like that, she admitted, and in that admission, a door cracked open. They talked. Not about them, not at first, but about Douglas, about her work, about his father's latest project. It was stilted, polite, a careful dance around a minefield. But then, she asked about him. Not what he had done, but how he was. And Thomas, for the first time, told the unvarnished truth. He spoke of the intensive therapy, of learning to sit with his own darkness without letting it consume him or anyone else, of the painful process of disentangling love from obsession. He spoke not to win her sympathy, but because she had asked, and he owed her the honesty he had never before been capable of. "I'm learning," he said, his voice low and earnest, his gaze steady on hers, "that loving someone isn't about making them your everything. It's about respecting that they are their own person, with their own path. And if you're lucky, your paths might walk alongside each other for a while." Hope listened, truly listened, and in his words, she heard a maturity, a self-awareness that had been utterly absent before. This was not the Thomas who had manipulated her with a ring, or who had screamed his devotion in a darkened room. This was a man, calm, centered, and heartbreakingly sincere. And in that moment, something shifted irrevocably inside her. The carefully constructed walls she had built around her heart, the ones fortified by Liam's steady, safe, but increasingly passionless love, began to tremble. Here was a man who had fought his worst demons and emerged, scarred but stronger. Here was a passion that was no longer a wildfire but a steady, warming hearth. He saw her, not as the perfect Logan princess, but as Hope, the woman, flawed and fighting, and he loved her not in spite of it, but because of it. This seismic shift within Hope did not go unnoticed in the wider ecosystem of their lives. Carter Walton, ever the noble and patient confidant, had allowed himself, in the quiet corners of his own heart, to hope for a future that perhaps one day, when the dust had settled, he could be the man to offer her the steadfast love she deserved. He had watched over her, counseled her, and seen the quiet dissatisfaction in her eyes when she spoke of her marriage. He believed in timing and in earning love through integrity and patience. But watching her with Thomas that day at Il Giardino, seeing the way her entire posture changed in his presence, the way she leaned in, the way the weariness in her eyes was replaced by a focused, intense light, Carter knew, with a swift and certain finality, that his hope had been in vain. He saw not a victim and her tormentor, but two souls connecting on a frequency so unique and powerful it left no room for a third. He lost her not to a scheme or a manipulation, but to a genuine, hard-won transformation that he, for all his goodness, could not compete with. There was no battle to fight, no wrong to right, he simply saw the truth in her eyes, and with a quiet, resigned sigh that spoke of a love that would remain forever unspoken, he folded his hand and stepped back, a gentleman to the last, his loss a silent, private ache. For Liam Spencer, the loss was not a quiet resignation but a cataclysmic, bewildering earthquake. He had built his entire existence around being the good guy, the stable port in every storm, the reliable alternative to the chaos that men like Thomas Forrester invariably brought. His love for Hope was real, but it was also safe, predictable, and had long since settled into a comfortable, if unexciting, rhythm. He believed their bond was unbreakable, fortified by shared history, by their children, by the fact that he was, in his own mind, the sane and rational choice. When Hope came to him, her expression not guilty but resolved, and told him that her feelings had changed, that she needed something different, something that terrified her but felt more authentically real than the comfortable life they had built, he simply couldn't compute. He argued, he pleaded, he invoked Steffi, he invoked Beth, he invoked every crisis they had ever weathered together. "It's Thomas, Hope. After everything he's done. How can you possibly," he sputtered, his worldview shattering. But her calmness was impenetrable. "The man you're talking about doesn't exist anymore, Liam," she said softly, but with an iron core of certainty. "And the woman who was afraid of him doesn't exist anymore either." His loss was absolute. He lost her not to a villain, but to a version of herself he didn't recognize and could never understand, a version that was brave enough to choose a complicated, uncertain love over a safe, certain emptiness. He was left standing in the ruins of his own perceived righteousness, the trophy of his goodness suddenly, and irrevocably, revoked, not by a scheme, but by a simple, undeniable truth. Hope's heart had chosen, and it had not chosen him. And in that moment, Liam, the man who had always had a choice, found he had none, a victim not of Thomas's manipulation, but of his own wife's awakening. Thomas Forrester to Los Angeles is not merely a character's reappearance, it is the throwing of a lit match onto a landscape already soaked in the gasoline of unresolved desire, shifting engagements, and emotional turmoil. The central, burning question on every spectator's mind is as simple as it is complex. Having departed with a new fiancée on his arm, is Thomas back to solemnize his vows to Paris Buckingham, or has his time away merely solidified a singular, obsessive mission, to finally, completely, and irrevocably win Hope Logan back? The answer is woven into the very fabric of his being, a tapestry of years spent in the shadow of a love that has both defined and destroyed him. Thomas Forrester has loved Hope Logan with a terrifying and unwavering intensity for years. A love that has driven him to both profound acts of creation and devastating depths of manipulation. This is not a flickering flame easily extinguished by distance or a new relationship, it is the core of his character, a fundamental drive that makes the notion of him returning to simply marry Paris feel not only improbable but narratively dishonest to his entire journey. His proposal to Paris, while perhaps offering a glimpse of the stable man he wishes to become, feels less like a genuine declaration of love and more like a desperate attempt to cauterize the wound Hope inflicted when she refused, yet again, to fully commit to him after he ended their relationship upon her rejection of his marriage proposal. The critical variable in this high-stakes equation is not Thomas's intent, which history suggests will be fiercely focused on Hope, but the profoundly altered landscape of Hope's own heart. She is no longer the grieving, vacillating woman he left behind. She is currently engaged to Carter Walton, a man who represents the antithesis of everything the Forrester men have offered her: stability, respect, and a love free from the specter of comparison and chaos. Hope insists she loves Carter and wants to build a calm, secure future with him. However, the foundation of this new engagement is already showing hairline fractures, threatened by the re-emergence of Daphne Rose, who previously played a pivotal role in breaking them apart, and, more significantly, by the seismic events surrounding Liam Spencer. Liam's presumed terminal diagnosis, delivered by the ever-meddling Grace Buckingham, acted as an emotional centrifuge, forcing Hope to prioritize what she believed were her final moments with the father of her child. This shared trauma created an intense, intimate bubble around them, pulling Hope's emotional focus sharply away from Carter and back to her foundational, if deeply flawed, connection with Liam. Yet, in a classic twist of fate, Liam's death sentence has been commuted. He is thriving, his brain bleed resolved and the feared tumor non-existent. This miraculous recovery leaves a vacuum of redirected emotion. Will Liam, forever prone to waffling, see this as a second chance to reclaim his family with Hope, or will his time facing mortality compel him to finally urge her toward a stable future with Carter? Complicating matters further is his renewed proximity to Steffi Forrester, another of his great loves, whose own marriage to Finn is poised on the precipice of disaster upon the inevitable revelation that his mother, Sheila Carter, is not only alive but has been masquerading as the kindly Fire Marshal Rose who is bonded with Luna Nozawa. Therefore, Hope stands at the crossroads of not one, but two potential love triangles, a dizzying position even for a woman accustomed to romantic entanglements. On one path stands Carter, the solid ground of a future she thinks she should want, but a relationship already besieged by external forces and perhaps internally questioned after her intense reversion to Liam. On another path lingers Liam, the comfortable, familiar pull of a history filled with family and passion, but also irrevocably tarnished by betrayal and indecision. And now, crashing back into this delicate balance is Thomas, the wild card, the tempestuous force of nature whose love is all-consuming and absolute. His re-entry promises to shatter any fragile equilibrium that may have formed in his absence. The central conflict for Hope will be a brutal war between her head and her heart. Her head, and the weary advice of everyone around her like her mother Brooke and Ridge, will scream for the safety of Carter, the man who represents a life free from the drama that has perpetually plagued her. But her heart has always held a forbidden fascination with Thomas's devastatingly certain love. Thomas never wavers in his desire for her, he never leaves her for another woman. His failures have been acts of monstrous manipulation, not indecisive betrayal. In a perverse way, his flawed, all-in devotion could appear more attractive than the waffling she has endured for years from Liam or the stable, yet perhaps less passionate, offer from Carter. For Thomas to succeed where he has so catastrophically failed before, he must undertake a campaign of utter transformation. He cannot simply return with grand gestures and pronouncements of love, he must demonstrate, through unwavering action, that he is truly the changed man he has occasionally pretended to be. He must be patient. He must be selfless. He must support her engagement to Carter even as he secretly hopes for its demise, proving he wants her happiness above his own possessiveness. He must resist every impulse to manipulate or scheme, allowing Hope to see the man beneath the obsession, the brilliant, talented, and deeply feeling father to Douglas. He must also confront the formidable opposition of his own family. Will the Forresters, particularly Ridge and Steffi, who have witnessed his destructive cycles firsthand, back off and allow a potential union, believing he has finally evolved? Or will they circle the wagons around Hope, whom they also love, to protect her from what they fear is another inevitable heartbreak? Furthermore, can Hope ever truly forgive the extensive history of psychological manipulation, the gaslighting, and the exploitation of her grief over Beth? Trust is the currency Thomas has always been bankrupt of, and it is the only one Hope will accept. Winning her back is not about sweeping her off her feet, it is about patiently building a foundation of trust brick by brick, proving his constancy not through words, but through 1,000 small, honest actions. The return of Thomas Forrester is the catalyst for a romantic maelstrom. He is not coming for a wedding with Paris, that engagement is a shield, a placeholder, and a tragedy waiting to happen. He is coming for Hope, and this time, he understands that the battle will not be won through force or deception, but through the agonizingly slow and humble process of proving himself worthy. The question is no longer if he will try to win her back, but whether a love forged in fire and dysfunction can ever be cooled into something sustainable, and whether Hope, surrounded by options that represent different facets of her own soul, will finally be ready to choose the flame, knowing it could either warm her or consume them both entirely. Hope Logan's life, so carefully constructed in the wake of what she believed was Liam Spencer's tragic and imminent demise, began to fracture not with a dramatic shatter, but with the soft, insistent pressure of a heartbeat she had been forced to forget. Her engagement to Carter Walton was a monument built on sacred ground, the final, selfless wish of a man she thought was dying, a directive from the grave to find love and light after his darkness had passed. Carter, solid, devoted, and breathtakingly earnest, was that love. He was the safe harbor after a lifetime of emotional tsunamis, a man who saw her not as a choice between women but as the only choice, and their impending marriage was the logical, joyful conclusion to a journey born from profound loss. Yet, that very foundation now crumbled beneath her feet, for the man whose death had authored her new beginning was not only very much alive but was standing before her, vibrantly and infuriatingly healthy, his eyes reflecting not the ghost she had mourned but a man reborn, a man who, in reclaiming his own future, now seemed to be reclaiming her as his own. This is Hope's dilemma, a torturous crossroads where the dutiful happiness of a promised future collides with the resurrected, chaotic pulse of a past love that refuses to die, forcing her to choose between the man who represents the peace she thought she wanted and the man who is, and perhaps always will be, the war she cannot stop fighting in her soul. Liam's pleas are not the desperate gasps of a doomed man but the confident, passionate declarations of one who has been granted a miraculous second chance. Having stared into the abyss of a death that was never real, he is now intoxicated with the sheer possibility of life, and his vision for that life is crystallizing around Hope with a clarity that feels like fate. The hours spent with her since Steffi's departure were initially a solace, a familiar comfort in a world turned upside down, but they have subtly metamorphosed into something more profound, a rediscovery of the woman he once vowed to love forever, a rekindling of a connection that never truly extinguished but merely banked its embers under the ashes of his mistaken diagnosis. He looks at her now and doesn't see a relic of his past, he sees the key to his future. His heartfelt pleas, therefore, are not merely suggestions of rekindled affection, they are a full-throated revocation of his own deathbed advice. He is essentially telling her that in trying to be noble, in trying to let her go, he made the greatest mistake of his life. He is begging her to see that his push toward Carter was the act of a man who believed he had no future, and now that a future stretches out before him, vast and open, he cannot imagine navigating it without her by his side. The cruelest irony, one that leaves Hope hella confused, is that his current desperation is rendered utterly authentic by the very fact of his earlier, equally authentic self-sacrifice. How can she doubt the sincerity of a love so great that it was willing to die for her happiness, yet now is so powerful it is fighting to live for it? Meanwhile, Carter Walton operates in a sunlit world blissfully free of these shadowy complexities, his course set firmly toward a horizon of marital bliss. From his perspective, the turbulence is over, the storm of Liam's illness and passing has cleared, leaving calm, open waters. His love for Hope is a straightforward, powerful certainty. He has endured the strange, painful circumstances of their beginning, stood by her through grief, and earned her yes through patience, understanding, and unwavering devotion. His conversation with Ridge Forrester is a testament to this unshakable confidence. He speaks not of doubts or ghosts, but of love endured and a future one. He is ready to marry her immediately, to cement the happiness they have forged together, completely unaware that the cornerstone of their relationship, Liam's blessing, is being violently pulled out from under them by the very man who gave it. Carter's love is pure, his intentions are honorable, and his impending heartbreak is therefore all the more tragic. He is the innocent party in this emotional maelstrom, a good man who followed the rules and played the hand he was dealt with integrity, only to have the game changed in